All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our 1-hour webinar, Are You a Messenger or a Negotiator with David Knox. I'm Dave Cummings, the New Hampshire Realtors Communications Director, and before we get started, we're going to share a couple of messages from our two keynote speakers at next year's conference, which is a year from now. That's September 21st and 22nd at the Capitol Center for the Arts in Concord. So your professional development committee's been hard at work putting the details together for this conference, and we're all excited to have two highly acclaimed speakers with us. One is Allison Levine, who's a mountaineer, leadership consultant, and author of On the Edge, The Art of High Impact Leadership. And Chris Voss, who's the CEO of Black Swan Group. He's formerly the FBI's lead hostage negotiator, and he's the author of Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. So I'm going to share my screen, and you will hear a few words from the two of them before we get going.
Hey everybody, Allison Levine here, and I am so excited because I'm going to be joining you next September for your annual meeting at the Capitol Center for the Arts in Concord. I'm going to be talking about the American Women's Everest Expedition and the lessons that I learned on that mountain, because I think I learned more about tackling challenge, overcoming obstacles, and dealing with a changing environment than just about any other trip I've been on. And I know we're dealing with a lot of those things these days, and we're going to make it. We're going to get through. It's all going to be fine, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you at your meeting next year. So hang in there, you guys. Keep climbing. Don't give up. Put one foot in front of the other, and I'll see you next September.
I'm the CEO of Black Swan Group. I'm the author of Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended on it. Where did I learn how to negotiate as if your life depended on it? I was an FBI hostage negotiator. I was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. But what's at stake when a child or a spouse has been kidnapped? A family's hopes and dreams for the future. What's at stake when a house is for sale? Family's hopes and dreams for the future. What's a kidnapped victim represent to a family? Cherished memories of the past. What's a home represent to a family? Cherished memories of the past. I mean, the stresses are all the same. Buying and selling a house is one of the 5 most stressful events in somebody's life. I mean, they are negotiating as if a life depended upon it, and their thinking is constricted by the stress of the experience. I mean, every conversation that a realtor's in is a difficult conversation. Every conversation with a buyer or seller is a difficult conversation. I mean, I got to tell you something. I think realtors should be volunteering on crisis hotlines on a regular basis. That's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to being there. Thanks for having me on today.
All right, so that leads very nicely into today's webinar on negotiations with David Knox, which we'll get to in just a minute. Along with David and me on the screen right now, you should see 2020 NHAR President Mark Drapo. Hello, Mark. And Professional Development Committee Chair Maggie Kirchhoff. Hi, Maggie. The two will be joining David occasionally through the hour. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and either Mark or Maggie will do their best to get as many of those to David as possible for him to answer. So now I'll ask Mark and Maggie to turn off their videos,
spaced it out,
and I'll introduce David Knox. I won't provide an entire bio because that would pretty much take up the entire hour, but I'll just say that David's been doing this for a while, and over 40 years, he's done more than 2,000 seminars over all 50 states and 11 countries. And he's here this morning to talk about negotiations with you. So now I will disappear and let you take it from here, David.
Thank you very much. It is such a pleasure to be with the New Hampshire Association of Realtors. I've done a lot of seminars up in your state over the years. I think I started off one of my first CRS courses was in your state. So I have fond memories of meeting the wonderful people in New Hampshire. So thank you for inviting me to your convention or this special add to the convention. Doing things a lot differently lately, but it's fun to see you. And what I want to do at the end of today is make sure you are a great negotiator. And before I continue, I would like to endorse Chris Voss. I've seen a number of his videos on YouTube, and I chose to buy his book, Never Split the Difference. And some of the things I'm going to be presenting today, I got from him. So I highly endorse hearing him. And yes, he's going to talk about hostage negotiations and things like that. So clearly, you've got to take it out of context and say, well, here's something that I can apply to my real estate business. So I'd like to get into it. And at the end of today, I think you're going to look forward to your next tough objection. You're actually going to welcome a tough buyer, a tough seller. You're going to welcome somebody who says, you know, could we try it, you know, $10,000, $20,000 higher, and you're going to welcome your next commission objection. So those are the skills I'd like to give you today. But to begin with, I'd like to just establish a basis. I believe that all real estate sells for market value. What do you think? I can't really hear your answer, but think about it. Does all real estate sell for market value? I believe that it does, because whatever price it gets, it's axiomatic, it was market value. But my question is, have you ever had sellers who want more? Like, have you ever not had sellers who want more? Then you go on a listing presentation, they say, well, yeah, but we've got a lot of improvements in our house, and you know, we can always come down and we need the money. We could just try it for a couple of weeks. And another real estate agent said they'd give us more. So would you try it at a higher price? And you end up going, okay. And you wimp out and you say, all right, I take the listing. And then you go back to the office, you go, I have a listing, I have a listing, I have a listing, and you don't have no listing. And the people say, well, what is the asking price? And you tell them what you got it listed for, and they go, ha, ha, ha. I hope you got a 2-year listing signed, because that's going to be on the market a long time. And all of a sudden, you're not excited about this overpriced listing. Then you have your buyers. We know homes sell for market value, but do you ever have buyers who want less than market value? And they say, you know, we really don't want to pay full price for anything because we've never done that. We want to make low offers on every house until we get like a really, really good deal, because we're not going to pay market value because that's what my dad told me to do. So will you drive me around for the next couple of months and show me 100 houses till we get a good deal? And you go, okay, let me get my keys. And you drive these people around week after month after year, and they never buy. And then if they do make an offer, it's multiple offers, and they're last on the list. So now you have this huge gap between overpriced listings and undermotivated buyers. What is that like for you? You look at this and go, oh my gosh, I need to go to a seminar on negotiating. But we spend in this industry working with, I guess what I'll just call the big gap. Sellers are way up here, buyers are way down there, and we're trying to work them back together. So how do you fix this gap? What do you do? Well, let's see. I guess we're going to have to start working these people down. So what do? We start with the sellers and say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, asking $1.5 million for a mobile home's a little bit high. I think you need to come down just a little bit. And they say, no, we really need the money. I said, no, you're going to have to just come down a little bit more, a little bit more. And they go, no, we really need the money. So no, you've got to come down, and you're working down more and more. Then you go to the buyers, you show them 5 homes, 10 homes, they make an offer, lose it. 15, they make an offer, lose it. Go back. Then you go back to the sellers and you start beating these people down month after month. And then you take the buyers out. And finally, the buyers decide to rent and the sellers decide to stay. Oh, gosh. Is that how this business feels to you sometime? And you decide, I'm out of here. So if you have experienced all of this, then we need to talk today. So where to begin with this mess? I'll tell you one clear place to begin. Deepak Chopra, the presenter, who's done so many books. One of the things that Deepak says, if I can quote him properly, says, you must let go of the outcome to create more income. Sometimes you need to let go. And what you need to do with people hit the extremes is to let go. Your first choice as a real estate agent is to decide with whom you want to work. Who do you want to represent? You don't have to work with everybody. If you have sellers that are asking a price that's clearly above market value, way unrealistic, you choose to just let go. And when the sellers say, well, would you try it at a higher price? I said, Mr. Seller, I appreciate your attempt, you know, to try to get $500,000 for your $200,000 home, but I just don't see it. And you're welcome to try that because it's your home. But as a real estate agent, if I accept your listing, it's a tacit approval that I believe you can get that. And I don't really believe it. So I think you need to choose somebody else. Same with buyers. Let go. Buyers, it's easier to let go of buyers because, especially right now as we're recording this, you don't need buyers, you need sellers. So please, please understand the first thing that you need to do before you do anything that I'm talking about in this seminar is to choose to not work with the people that are such far extremes with whom you cannot reason, okay? Let go of the extreme. So we are going to begin with that fundamental philosophy. Next, I'd like to take you through an exercise. I'd like each of you to think about a time you're writing an offer, or let's start with the seller. You go to a listing presentation and you show the CMA And the CMA, I don't know what number to pick. Let's say 500,000. And you present the CMA to the seller and you say, you know, based on all the prices, you know, from 490, it looks like 500,000 is, you know, kind of the top where it's going to sell. And then the seller says, well, you know, that's not what we want. We really want more. Well, what were you thinking? Well, we really want to try it at 550. And once again, you go, okay. And you take this offer or listing, you write 550. And now you go over to the buyer and you've got a home that's listed for 550. And you show it to the buyer and say, what would you like to do? Well, we really think it's too much money. We'd like to, you know, offer low. What were you thinking? And they say, well, we'd like to offer, you know, 400 or 450. And you go, okay. Now you take this offer back to the seller. You present the low offer to the seller counsels. You go back to the buyer and you say, no, the seller counsel counter that. You go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. This is being a messenger. And this is what's happening all over the real estate industry. Because I talk to agents. What's going on? Well, you know, they listed high, then they came in low, and then they countered, and then they countered again. I would say by the time you have, you know, one round trip on a counter offer, something is horribly wrong. In the perfect world, and I get it imperfect. In the perfect world, here's what I want you to do. Oh, it looks like this thing came apart. In the perfect world, what I want you to do is, oh, look at this. We have a technical difficulty. This little tray came apart. Anybody know how to get that back on? See, this is the fun of live television. It's back. we fixed it on the fly. Perfect world. You quote 500 as the asking price market value, and you use every skill I'm going to present to you today, and you get it listed for 500 or 510 or, you know, something reasonable. And then you go over here to the buyer, and this is how it should work. The seller says they want 550, and you go through the methods we're using today, and you do objective standard, you question their position, and the owners agree to something reasonably close to 500. Now you've got a real listing that's marketable. Next, now you show the home to the buyer. Now it's listed at 500 or close to that, and the buyer does the same thing. The buyer says, you quote the price at 500, what would you like to offer? And the buyer says, well, we'd like to come in at 450, and you go, 450? Kind of, well, yeah, that's kind of all we wanted to offer. Well, okay, but I thought you really liked this house. Well, we do. Well, my experience in real estate is when people really like a house, you know, they kind of pay what they're asking. If you don't like it, I can show you something else. See how we let go. No, we really like it. If you didn't buy it, what do you think it would sell for? Well, it would probably sell for pretty close to 500. Pretty close. I think it would sell at 500 or more. So if you really like the house, I'm going to suggest you pay what you believe to be market value. Now, I don't want to give a buyer a number to offer. That always gets you into trouble. So what happens is you've got the listing closer to the value. The buyer comes in, and let's say you can't get them all the way up to full price. They come in at 490. So now you go over here, and you present it at 490. Who knows, the seller for 10 grand, they might say yes. If not, we go back with a counter. So that is where I'd like you to go today. But if you're doing this huge, wide gap of way overpriced listings and undermotivated buyers, I promise you, you are going to learn to hate this business. So let's talk about people who are messengers. And again, all a messenger does is relay information back and forth. Well, they want this, they want to offer this, they want this, they want to offer this. That's a messenger. So how do you know if you're a messenger? Well, when a seller's request for a high asking price and you go, okay, well, that's what they need to sell, to a buyer's offer, low offer, you just go, okay. In fact, I'd like to tell you a true story. I had a home listed in a resort home in Southern California. It's a painful story. It was right in 2008, 9, 10 when everything was crashing. I had a condo paid, I think, pardon me, I think I paid $460 for it, which was way over market value. In fact, the moment I paid $460, the market dropped to $440. It just kept dropping. By the time I decided to sell it, the realtor came in. I said, you know, I do a video called Pricing Your Home to Sell. That means I want to price this place to sell. I want the home gone. And she said, well, I hate to tell you this, but the real number for this is 260 to 264. And I think we priced it at 264. A week later, the listing agent who told me that it was only going to sell for 264, she comes to me with an offer of $200,000. $200,000. 200 grand. I'm gonna cut to the chase at the end of the story. It sold for 264. So let's, just so you know that, I know how this story ends. So she writes an offer on a 264 home that ultimately sells for 264. She writes one for 200 grand. That's what real estate agents are doing around the country. And I want to, how do you do this $200,000? You know it's worth more than that. Well, but you know, you got to present offers that buyers write. I get the legalities of it, but what about the selling skill? I would love to have been in the dining room and the buyer said, can we offer 200? And watch her go, okay. And that's the kind of stuff we need to weed out of this business. A messenger just goes, well, okay, if that's what you want to write. What would a negotiator do? A negotiator would hang in there. We'll talk about some ideas what a negotiator would do. So, you know, same thing. I know. So where'd you come up with 200? Well, that's what they wanted to offer. What a wimpy sentence anyway. Don't ever let that come out of your mouth. What else does a messenger do? They treat a client's initial request as the final position. So when a seller says, could we try it at 550, you go, okay, rather than get them to 500. Same with buyers. Messengers also operate out of fear. They're afraid to confront, a fear of confrontation. And I get that. We all have within us this social desire to be liked and accepted by other people. And the concept of having any kind of confrontation, whether it's in relationships or business, I get it. Some of us in the real estate business are kind of people pleasers, and we go, oh, okay, I guess that's okay. It's kind of like your meal comes to the table and you ordered medium and it came back medium rare and you really wanted to put another couple of minutes in. You go, oh, no, I guess I'll eat. I was actually with a guy the other night who did that. He says, no, I'm just going to, because he didn't want to confront the server and send it back. And I understand that. But when you carry that into business, you end up misrepresenting people by just saying okay to positions. Like a doctor says, by the way, if you don't quit smoking, you're going to die. You know, the doctor knows that. Are you going to tell the patient? I don't want to tell him that. You know, imagine if doctors did that. So the other part about a messenger, they believe that if they agree with their client, it's a good thing. If you are representing a buyer, are you representing their position or interest? Their interest is to buy a home. Their position is often to pay less than it's worth. And if you really care about your buyers, you're going to teach them they're going to have to pay more. So messengers add no value, no wisdom, no counseling the transaction, and the deals typically won't go through. So let's talk about negotiator characteristics. To a seller's request for a high asking price, at 550, they're going to ask questions on the position. They're going to direct attention to the seller's points of interest. They're going to remind them of an objective standard. They're going to go to market value, and it's going to be done properly. To a buyer's low offer on a home, the agent questions their position. They focus on the benefits of owning a home. They agree on the objective value of the property and encourage the buyer to make a more reasonable offer. So I want you all to be a negotiator, not a messenger. My gosh, we could go back to an old fax machine. If you want to just be a messenger. So what I want to address are the skills of being a negotiator. And the first one is managing expectations. And if Mark and Dave and Maggie said, okay, David, your time is up. You only have 5 minutes left to present negotiating. All I would present to you is this one, managing expectations. It is the #1 most crucial part of being in the business is managing expectations, because reality is going to continue to happen. Bad inspections, low appraisals, mistakes, timing issues, a FedEx of a DD-214 form getting lost so you can't, I mean, you can go down the list of all the things that can go wrong. You can't control those things. You work to make them better in the long run, but you can control people's expectations. I fly a lot. I got a flight today. And if I have an expectation that this flight's going to leave right on time, I'm setting myself up for disaster. My expectation is if it leaves on time, I'm happy. So I'm going to talk about managing expectations. You can use that in appraisals, inspections, multiple offers, all those kinds of things. Questioning their position, focusing on their interest, providing the objective standard rather than letting parties negotiate against each other, help the parties see the other side, and provide options and consequences. So expectations. When a buyer says to you, well, I thought you were supposed to get me a good deal. Well, wait a minute. The problem is in the buyer counseling interview, you didn't have the discussion. By the way, my goal is to help you find a home. And if they say, no, 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 we want a good deal, and go, wait a minute, one or the other, you want a good home or a good deal? And they'll say, well, we want a good deal on a good home. Okay, what's the definition of that? My definition of that is you buy a home that you like and pay market value or close to it. How many of you listed a home, you got it at the right price, and all of a sudden and you sell it in a day? And what do the sellers say? Wow, that was quick. You sold it too fast. We must have underpriced. In a market that we're in now, as we're shooting this video, homes are selling multiple offers in a matter of hours in a lot of markets. Well, if you don't prepare the seller for that, you're going to get in trouble. They go, wow, this is so fast, we underpriced. Maybe we should raise the price. The reality is homes are selling quickly, and if you don't prepare the seller for that, it is your fault. And I'm just going to go on record and say everything's your fault. How's that? If a transaction falls through, it's your fault. It's not the buyers. It's not the sellers. You are the professionals. You are the experts. You know what happens, and you need to tell your sellers. A buyer walks in and says, well, this house is going to need a lot of work. Well, of course, it was built in 1920. What were you expecting? You know, Wi-Fi in the walls? Come on, prepare them for that. We want the same price that our neighbor got. Well, then you're going to have to sell when he or she sold, 5 years ago when the market was higher. So again, the reality is not the problem. Expectation is the problem, because reality just continues to be what is, and you cannot control that. So think of all the things that happen in a transaction to your buyers and to your sellers. And in those pre-counseling interviews, you prepare them for that. You prepare them for a low appraisal. You prepare them for these ridiculous 27-page inspections. In fact, we just shot a video on managing buyer expectations on inspections. So that's going to be going up for our members. And the key part of that is, one of them is to show the inspection. You get one of your worst inspections and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller or buyer, I just want to show you, this is what an inspection looks like. Look at all this stuff. Look, if you got this inspection, what would you want to do? Well, we'd never buy that home. Exactly. Well, let's look closely here. In fact, one of my suggestions on an inspection report is don't even show it to your sellers. Just turn it over and write how much it's going to cost to fix it and show them the number. So you can educate clients before reality happens. Home values. Tell your buyers, home prices are going up. If home prices are going down, you talk to your sellers. Which reminds me, I've been in the business for, I don't know how many years, 40 some years. And I've seen good press and bad press. And agents say, well, we're getting bad press. There is no such thing as bad press. It's either seller press or buyer press. So the press we're getting today is, oh, home prices are going way up. Homes are selling very quickly for over asking price. Who do you give that news to? You give that to the buyer, because the buyers will believe the news. Everybody seems to believe that. So you say, well, look at what, the news says homes are selling for more than asking price, so the buyers will believe that. Now, when the market turns, as it inevitably will, and the prices start going down and homes sell for less than asking price, you take that news and you give it to your seller in the CMA. So you can use the news no matter what. Tell buyers how long it's going to take to find a home. You might, on a buyer counseling interview, say, by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, how long do you think it's going to take us to find a home? Well, we figured it'd take about 2 months. If they expect to take 2 months to find a home, guess how long it's going to take? You find them one this afternoon, they're going to go, well, that's too quick. They're going to wait 2 months. You can ask them questions like, how many homes do you think you should see before you buy? We'd like to see all of them. You go, well, there's 1,200 homes on the market at 10 a day. You can do the math. Prepare them for the fact that you found homes for buyers within the first 4, 5, or 10, or whatever your statistics are. And again, we talked about inspections, appraisals coming in low, how long things take. So these are all areas that have wrecked the transaction. It's up to you to manage the expectations. Next. Anytime a buyer or seller challenges you with anything, price, negotiating, terms, whatever it is, there is a tendency to defend our position. When you get into a debate or an argument with another person and you're on opposite sides of the issue, the tendency is to state your position. So when a buyer says, well, we want to offer $450,000 on a $500,000 home, our tendency is to say, what do you mean it's worth $500,000? Let me show you what the other comps are, and this is the best home in the neighborhood, and the other ones are selling $500,000, and we start defending the $500,000. And the problem is you're now pushing back to the buyers, you're going to harm their relationship, and it really doesn't do any good. Instead, and this is easier to teach than it is to do, instead you can say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I appreciate that you have an opinion on what you'd like to offer on the property. If you don't mind me asking, why $450,000? Where did you come up with that $450,000? And then be quiet and let them defend their position. You don't defend your own. Try this in your relationships. Try it in your life as much as you can. Take a breath. in your relationships with husbands, wives, children. You know, you get in debates over a million things. The way to practice this is just take a breath, and you know you want to say something. You know you want to go into defensive mode. Take a breath and just say, I appreciate you bringing it up. Tell me more. Why do you feel that way? Question their position. And oftentimes when people repeat their position, they modify it because they realize their first statement was maybe a little bit extreme. So question their position. Don't defend your own. When they come up with a position, you know, how did you arrive at that position? You say 500 asking price. They want to do 550 instead of saying, you're smoking in the shower. You think you can get 550 for the only way you're going to get 550 for this place if we burn it down. That's not going to work. But if you can say, I'm just curious, how did you arrive at that price? In fact, we just did a role play the other day where that's kind of what we did. So how did you arrive at that price? You know, based on the market value of mid 500s, how do you think this will affect a sale? What will you do if it doesn't sell? So ask questions. Next, focus on client interest. And I believe Chris Voss will probably address this as well, the difference between interest and position. People will take a position, and a position is something that could be written on a listing agreement or purchase agreement. Their position might be price, time, personal property, and just go down your whole purchase agreement and take a look at some of those positions. Oh, commission rate, that's a big one. So they're going to have a position on what they want to pay for commission. And if you get into an argument and a debate over, yeah, what should be this, or it might be that, and you start debating all these positions, you'll probably typically lose the argument because you're at one place, they're at another. Commission, you're at X, they're at X minus 1. You know, how are you going to fix that? So what you want to do is to get to their interest, which is the heart of the issue, which is literally emotion. I said one of the most important parts of negotiating is managing expectations. The other one is motivation. And in fact, I will say this, the two most important things about being a good realtor and a good salesperson is motivation, expectations, understanding how people feel, what drives them, what is their why. Same with you. People tell you what they want. What you need to ask is why. So somebody comes along and they say they want to pay a lower commission. You acknowledge it kindly, gently, and then you say, if you don't mind me asking, you know, why would you like a lower commission? And they'll say, well, we want to save money. And this may sound redundant, but okay, tell me why you believe that's going to do. Well, you know, less to you, more than me. So in other words, they're not really objecting to your commission rate. Their position is they want to increase their revenue, their bottom line. And then you might ask one more question, why do you want to make more money? Because we're buying another home and we need the money to buy it. So really, their position is we want you to cut your commission 1%. Their motivation, the heart of the issue is they want to get their family settled in their brand new home. So what you do is you focus on the joy of getting into their new home, the feelings of celebrating the holidays, and get them to focus on this. And then you can show them that by paying your fee, all the services that you provide will more likely solve this than a low fee. Because if a low fee causes the home not to sell, they don't get their interest. A buyer has a position. Well, we want to offer $450 instead of $500. So the position is they want to save $50,000. And of course, my flippant question would be, if you don't get the house, what are you going to do with the $50,000 that you saved? Don't actually ask that, but you're thinking it. So get to the heart of the issue. Why do they want this? Somebody wants to delay the closing date a month. Okay, I appreciate that. And may I ask why? And they may describe a situation of getting out of one thing into another. You know, all the myriad things that can happen. And then you might be able to satisfy their feelings with a different position. So remember, you'll never win a discussion of positions. It almost backfires almost every time. But if you can get to why you take that position, if you can get literally to the heart of the issue, it begins to open up options because there may be another position the seller will concede to that will help the buyer. So focus on interests, not positions. Ask why. And of course, one of the questions I like to ask sellers, or recommend you ask sellers, is, have you definitely decided to move at this time? Do you want to sell? Well, we want more money. Well, then you should probably stay. Yeah, but we've got a new home down in Florida we're moving into. Well, then you'll need to sell. Yeah, but I don't want to give it away at that price. Well, then you can stay. Yeah, but my family would not be happy with that. Well, then you'll need to sell. Do you want to sell? Do you want to sell? Sell, stay. It's like, make up your mind. Do you want to sell? Do you want to stay? Next. When buyers and sellers negotiate against each other through their realtor, you can get into some real nasty fights. And you get a buyer that might look at the asking price and say, who's that seller? Who do they think they are asking that kind of money? I know they didn't pay that for it. They're making way too much money on it. And then the sellers look at the buyer's on an offer and they go, what the heck are they doing that for? Where are they from thinking that my home's only worth this? And now you have the buyers and sellers really disliking each other. It's not a good basis for negotiation. So instead, what you want to do is provide an objective standard. It is the ultimate negotiating thing. So in other words, instead of a buyer and a seller negotiating against each other, they negotiate against the middle ground. What is the objective standard? What is normal? What is reasonable? A good friend of mine who I rode Harleys with, Brenda. Brenda was with the Teamsters, and she negotiated at the Teamsters. So you can imagine some of the tough negotiations they have. And one of the things Brenda did was she said, I'm representing, in this case, I think it was a janitorial service in some community. And she said the janitorial people were asking for a raise of, and I'm gonna have to make up the numbers, of like 20%. It had a number up here above where they were. So Brenda, if she was a messenger, would just go to manager and go, they want 20% or we're gonna walk out. Well, what Brenda did, this is what made her a really good negotiator over the years, was to trying to find an objective standard. So she went back to her members, who she was representing, and said, look, I'm gonna try to create the best contract I can for you. But if you take a look at all the other services that are similar to yours in other communities and other states, they average right about here. So this is market value for what it is that you are doing. So she would first of all get them to negotiate against an objective standard. She didn't have them get mad at management. They might get mad and say, well, this is kind of what the market is for this particular service. Then she'd do the same with management, because the managers wanted to maybe pay less. And she would say, no, that's not fair, because if you take a look at the objective standard market value for this service, you should be paying them more. So the objective standard takes the emotion out of it, or at least minimizes it, and gives people something objective against which to negotiate. So what is the objective standard in our business? It's, facts, it's data, it's the CMA, it's what the market is doing, those kinds of things. So you need to provide that. And I'm going to take you through one of my favorite ways to establish market value. Here's how this works. You are working with a buyer. Let's see if this shows up. I wonder if I should use green. Does that show up a little better? Okay. Okay, so you're working with a buyer and you're trying to teach market value to the buyers. Well, they're going to be down here. So the question is, how do I teach my buyer what market value is? I'm going to share with you a technique that I hope that you know that I've done it. I've had it done to me. I've had agents do it. It absolutely works. What you do is, before you take the buyers to the actual homes that you want them to buy, you first take them to 3 homes that have sold recently, that are as similar as you can get to the ones you want them to buy. And you say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I am your buyer's agent. I am representing your interest. And the most important thing that I can do is teach you market value. Here's how I'm going to do it. We're going to play a little game called The Price is Right. Isn't that amazing? Now, for a little time, we're going to play The Price is Right, and the winner gets a $20 Starbucks card. And you can make some fun. Say, okay, Jim and Karen, you're each going to guess the price of these homes, and whoever gets more, you're going to get the Starbucks card. Just lighten it up a bit. So what you do is you drive to the front home. Now, remember, the key, these are sold. They're sold, not for sale. They're sold, so it's real numbers. You have the feature sheet, and you drive up in front of the curb, and you have them look at the house, and you say, okay, it's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, double garage, this, and you describe the property, the square footage. You say it's sold 17 days ago, it's on the market for 4 days. What do you think that's sold for? And they look at you, and they go, well, I think it's sold for $400,000. Okay, Jim, what do you think it's sold for? Oh, I don't know. I think I'm going to say it's sold for $410,000. Okay, is that your final answer? And they go, yeah, final answer. And say, okay, this sold for $1.6 million. That's how it's going to feel to them. The real number might be it's sold for $470,000. They go, $470,000 for that? And you go, yep, 3 days it's sold and had 4 offers on it. Wow. You see what I'm doing? Then you take them to the second house. You do the same thing. And, maybe this time they guess 440 and it's 460. They're getting close. By the third home, you're going to find they're getting very close. I was in England driving around a few weeks ago, pardon me, with a real estate agent from from Sheffield, England. And I wanted to kind of see if I could learn the market. And we drove by a property and I said, you know, I have no idea the market value here in this part of Sheffield, but I'm going to guess 180,000 pounds for this. And she said, no, you're a little low. That'd probably be about 250,000 pounds. I went, okay. So we drive by another neighborhood and I look at another one. I said, I'm going to guess 380, 390, something like that. Yeah, you're getting closer. That'd probably be low fours. And then we got in another beautiful neighborhood, tree-lined street. And I looked at this wonderful brick flat and I said, I'm going to guess 800. She says, you are right on, that's 780. So it only took me 3 homes for me to be within a few percentages of market value. I promise you, I'm begging you, try this, do this. It's fun. And now when you get here, you're less likely to get a fight. And by the way, for those of you saying, well, I don't like to play games and I would never do this with your buyers. Guess what? You can't not do it. You're going to do it whether you want to or not. You know why? Because you are going to show them 3 homes and they are going to have an opinion of value and it's going to be lower than the asking price. And now you've got them all upset at the homes you want them to buy. How stupid is that? Let them vent their anger on something that's already sold. And then by the time they get through and they vented on this one, and then they vented on this one, and they go, okay, I guess that's what it is. By the time they get here, they go, okay, this must be worth 470. And by the way, if you really want to have some fun with it, continue playing the Price is Right on the ones you want to buy. Say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you guys got really good at this. These are 3 homes that are actually for sale, and you're free to buy any one of these if you like. They're actually for sale. In fact, did you enjoy the game? Yeah, it was kind of fun. Okay, well, I'll just keep the feature sheet here. Let's go in and take a look. And then at the end of the showing, you say, what did you think? And they guess 470. You go, man, you guys are good. Yeah, 465. Did I see somebody wave a hand for a question? Okay, yes, fire away.
We have a question from the audience that asks, at what point do you walk away from a listing in this busy market if the seller wants to overprice, or do you?
Oh, at what point do you walk away from a listing in this busy market? Trying to think of a good way to answer that. My first answer is that is your choice. I can't tell you when to do that. But here are the criteria that I would use in making that decision. Number one is motivation. Everything begins with motivation. None of you have ever had a pricing problem. It's always a motivation problem. So when do you walk away? I guess if they're going to overprice it by an amount where you know there's just no chance of it happening, you just go, do I really want to go through with this? Number 2, if they want to overprice it and then also cut your fee, then you've got to decide. And this, I talked about being a good negotiator is getting in touch with your feelings and your assertiveness. And I think as humans, we've been taught, if it doesn't feel right, it might not be right. And I think you need to relax. And as you sit there with these homeowners, ask yourself how you feel. Can I have a relationship with these people? Are they reasonable? Are they motivated? Are they flexible in where they are? Are they willing to pay me? And then you make that decision. And my gosh, I can't make that decision for you. You have to trust your gut, trust your feelings. I would say this, however, when the market is really hot, if it still is in your market, you're probably prudent to stretch it a little bit. But if you're going to stretch the price, I would say to the seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's a good market. I'm willing to stretch the price a little bit, but then you do a conditional price reduction. If in 5 days we haven't had enough showings or haven't had an offer, then I'm going to ask that we reduce it closer to market value and get an agreement to that effect. If you want, you could even pre-fill a price reduction. And I'm just going to stop. And the person who asked the question, if that person would like to re-ask the question or let me know if I answer that question properly and we can come back and cover, because it is a great question. When do you walk away? And I guess one of those answers is like, you'll know when it doesn't feel right. One other thing I've heard people say, well, what does it hurt to take an overpriced listing? Because, now everybody's out there and I get more prospects from it. So one listing leads to another one. I agree with that. There's nothing better than having a listing to generate activity to get more listings. But remember, after that listing's been on the market 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks in a market where things are selling in days. Basically, you have your sign up there. Hey, I'm David Knox. I have this home for sale. I haven't been able to sell it for 2, 3, 4 months. I can't sell this home. List with me and I won't sell yours either. So at some point it becomes negative news. So Mark, did they have any other response to what I said?
No, I think you've got it covered. If it comes up, I'll bring it back up again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And by the way, at the end of this, You can see more of what we do, david@davidknox.com. And if you email me, david@davidknox.com, I'm glad to respond to your questions. So feel free to do that. So we talked about Price is Right. Next, I'm going to take you to the 4 responses to objections. PAID, pause, acknowledge, isolate, discover. I have said, I've been doing role plays for our online real estate training. And I'm having agents and people playing the role of buyer and seller, and I play the role of the agent, and I ask them to give me any objection they want. And the next thing I'm going to say is going to sound horribly arrogant, so I'm going to say it with a smile. You can give me any objection you want. I'm not afraid of it. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're in the tractor building business. Give me an objection. I can handle it. I know that sounds arrogant, but the reason I feel that sense of comfort is because I know how I'm going to respond to it. So we did a role play in the studio a couple days ago, and I told Pamela, I said, I don't want to know what the objection is. Just let's sit down and say, Pamela, you're ready to list with me. And she raised the objection. I had no idea what it was going to be. And I didn't care, because when she raised it, and I didn't know what it was going to be, it forced me to do number 1, and that was just pause. Our first response to an objection, to an argument, to a confrontation is to run in and fight back. And I've said, just take a breath. So maybe pause. So somebody says, you know, we'd really like to try pricing a home $50,000 higher than that. Instead of going, what do you mean 50,000 higher than that? Where did you get a stupid number like that? By the way, I'm questioning their position, but it's rhetorical and it's confrontive. But you just pause and say, okay, I hear you. And then number 2 is an acknowledgement, which can be a grunt, a groan, a nod. It can be anything. It's not an agreement. It's not a disagreement. It's just, I heard you. No different than you're on a cell phone and every once in a while you go, yeah, In fact, try being on a cell phone with somebody or a phone with somebody and don't say anything for a while. I promise you, they're going, are you still there? Right? So you need to kind of wait, and then you acknowledge. Sounds to me like the commission would be an issue. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, it sounds like the size of some of these rooms is too small for you. Is that what I hear you saying? Yes. So we pause, we acknowledge, I heard what you said. And by the way, please, this works in relationships. And I'm using it in my relationship, and I try my best that if something comes up that's an issue, which will come up if you're with another human being on this planet, your first response should probably be to just take a breath and pause, acknowledge and say, appreciate you bringing that up. It sounds like an issue. Thank you for bringing it up. You know, other than that, how are we doing? You know, other than the small bedrooms, how do you like the house? Other than the commission, how do you feel about listing with me? And then D is to discover. Really should have been question, but PAIQ didn't spell anything, so I used the word discover. So back earlier on, I said, question their position, don't defend your own. So any single objection you ever get can be handled by pausing, acknowledging, thank them for bringing it up, acknowledge that they have every right to bring up those objections, respect their objection, whatever it is, they have every right to raise those concerns. And then you can say, well, other than that, are we good to go? Because if not, there's another concern you need to know about. Finally, say, tell me more about that. Why is the commission objection an issue? Tell me, you say these bedrooms are too small. Too small for what? What were you hoping to put in the bedrooms? And just be curious. How about, you know what? For step 4, maybe you can write down on your own, just be curious. Curiosity. It's innocence of discovery. Like, oh, I wonder why you said that. Rather than, you're an idiot. Why do you want to do that? So next, feedback versus advice. Another major component of negotiating. Often in your career, buyers and sellers are going to ask you for advice. Friends often ask you for advice. Say, you know, I'm with this friend of mine, or my daughter, my son, or my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. There'll be something. And they'll go, what do you think I should do? Have you ever had that? Say, I haven't really having this problem, and I don't know what to do. What do you think I should do? And you say, well, I think you should do this, and that. And they go, no, that won't work. Well, then try this. No, that's stupid. That wouldn't work. Well, how about this? No, that's not going to work. No matter what advice you give them, they just pound back and go, that's not going to work. And finally, sometimes in frustration, you say, well, what do you think you should do? And they say, well, what I think I should do is, and they come up with 3 answers and off they go. And you go, why am I giving advice? And the answer is stop giving advice. When a buyer says to you, what should I offer? Oh, no. Oh, no. You never, ever tell a buyer a number to offer. Seller says, where should I price it? No. I'm not going to give you a price, Mr. Seller. That's your price. You're going to give feedback that'll make it very clear where they should price it. And another big one you get is multiple offers, and your buyer says, well, how much should I offer to get it? And you want to give them a number. No, there's no number you can give them. A seller says, should I accept offer A, B, or C? Should I counter? Don't give them advice, give them feedback. So what's the difference? Feedback is you're telling somebody, or advice, you're telling somebody what to do. And that almost never works. Your advice backfires. Feedback is, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you the likely outcomes if you do A, B, or C. When you give somebody advice, you're limiting. Now they can only do what you told them to do. If you give them feedback, it's empowering. So somebody comes to you and they're having a tough time with their son and daughter, rather than saying, I think you should do this. If it's within your purview, you can say, you know, I can't tell you what to do with your young son. That's a decision you're going to make, but I can tell you what I hear you saying. You've been frustrated with him for 4.5 weeks. You've done this. You felt that way. You said this. You said that. And you kind of summarize what you see. And oftentimes people go, gosh, you are right. You are so right. Yep, I know what I'm going to do. And they'll say, thanks for the advice. You didn't give me advice. You gave them feedback. I remember my father was going in and had prostate cancer. And he turned to the doctor and said, what should I do? And they said, if I remember right, well, I think he said they can do prednisone, or they can do surgery, or they can do nothing. I think those were the three options. And my dad, like any other patient, would say, what do you think I should do? And the doctor did not tell my father what to do. He said, and I'm going to kind of make this up. He said, one thing you can do is nothing at all. And ultimately, guys end up dying of prostate cancer anyway. So you could just write it out. You know, you're 70, so you could write it out. Number two, you could have surgery. But the problem is at your age with your lung condition, if we do surgery, there's a 47.3% chance that you could die in surgery. And we could put you on prednisone, which will make it easier to breathe, but you're going to be really shaky, et cetera. So those are your three outcomes. So the doctor said, you know, here's what could happen. And then my father made the decision. If I recall, I know he didn't do surgery. I know he didn't do nothing. I think he chose prednisone. But the point is that a good doctor, you ask for advice, but the doctor will give feedback. So when you give your sellers and buyers feedback, they're responsible. If you tell them what to do, you are responsible. If you say, it's going to sell at this price, or counter this offer, you're not going to get a better one, or offer this, it's a good number, you're in trouble. So don't do that. By the way, feedback is assertive. You're expressing your feelings. You're not telling them what to do. Giving advice is aggressive. Another example that I like to use is a GPS. Y'all have GPSs. Okay, you just open up your phone, you plug in, and everybody's got a GPS. So my question to you is, does a GPS give feedback or advice? I always like to do this with a live audience, and some people, well, it gives advice. It tells me where to go. It tells, take the left, turn north, do this, turn at the next stoplight. And I would say that it also gives feedback. So when it's in pure map view, when it's just in map view and you haven't plugged in a destination, it says, here's where you are. Feedback. You're right here, 7300 Metro Boulevard. And I might say, well, I want to go to the airport. And the GPS says, well, okay, fine, but here's where you are. And for somebody who knows the area, oftentimes map view is enough, isn't it? Okay, that's right. If I'm on the east side of the street, then I can take a right to get out of here. Okay, so for many of you, the map view is good enough. Just, I can give you the feedback. When you're on the east side, you got to be over here. You go, okay. Now, if I'm in New Hampshire and I'm trying to get to Concord or something, I would say, I don't know how to get there. So I'm going to now plug in an address, and now I'm going to get advice because I get turn-by-turn instructions. So I just want you to know the GPS metaphor is perfect to delineate between feedback and advice. And sometimes feedback's enough. Sometimes you need bloody advice. But how many times have you plugged something into your GPS and it tells you to take a left, take a right, and you look at that? Well, that's a stupid route. You would never go that way at 5 o'clock because it forced you to be in the left lane at 15th Street. So that's one of the problems. So in summary, to the best of your ability, take a breath, let go, and give people feedback and let them make their own decisions. Negotiating the purchase, I'm going to wrap up with a couple of things on this. We're in a market where, remember, now's a good time to work with sellers, not buyers. Guess who wins every multiple offer situation? Answer, listing agent. I want to be a listing agent in this market, not a buyer agent. And because that's where you make all the money. But if you are working with a buyer and you've got to write a contract, it better be a good one. Quick story, I was buying this same property down in Rancho Mirage. I bought another home down there, and I found a home I was really in love with, and I turned to my realtor and I said, how much do I need to offer on this? And she came up with a number. They're asking 200, 199, but 195 will take it. And what for a closing date? Then she said, what do you want to do for a closing date? And I said, this was June of 2001. And I said, well, let's make the closing date October because that's when the season starts. Well, she presents the offer, comes back, and it was countered. The closing date was countered from October to the end of June because it was an estate. And she came back and said, well, they counted the closing date. And I said, why? Well, it's an estate, it's vacant. And as you know, estates they don't care as much about money as they do closing dates. So when I tell the story, people say, well, what kind of idiot were you to write a long closing date when you used to be a real estate licensed agent and you know dates are important? Because I was being the buyer, not the realtor. And had she been assertive, had she been a negotiator and given me feedback, my position was close October 1. She could have said, David, I hear that you want to close October 1. Other than the closing day, how do you feel about the whole transaction? I would have said everything else is fine. Okay, then may I ask you, why do you want to close October 1? And my honest answer would have been, I don't know. I don't come, I'm not going to come back down till the season probably starting in October. And she could have given me feedback. She could have given me advice, say, you're an idiot. You should set the closing for June 28th because the estate will like it. But she could have gotten me to the same place by giving advice, say, David, you told me you wanted to buy this house, right? Oh, absolutely, I want to get it. In that case, just so you know, I'll remind you, this is an estate. And there's 3 children who are involved trying to settle the estate. And one of their main motivations is to get this off the books quickly. So what do you think you should do on a closing date in order to match their needs? And I would have said, oh, that's right. Okay, well, in that case, let's close in June. That's how feedback, that's a real situation. And to this day, this was 2001, to this day, I'm still upset about the fact she let me write a stupid closing date. So don't be a messenger, be a negotiator. So you're going to write a good offer. You know all of this stuff. Obviously, price, what is the best offer? In most cases, it's price, but not always. It's other costs, concessions, earnest money, proof of funds, are they pre-qualified and approved, et cetera. The other thing I'd like to do in this market is to, as a buyer agent, I want to present my offer through the listing agent directly in person to the seller. And I've spoken in all 50 states in the US. In some states, we don't let the buyer's agent present the offer to my seller. Only I can do that. I want to say, oh, shut up. Why? Why are you so protective? As a seller, what are you afraid of? What do you think the buyer agent's going to do? Bring the buyer agent in, say, this is Jim. He's presenting his contract. He's representing these buyers. Here's his contract. Do you have any questions of Jim? Okay, Jim, thank you so much for writing a purchase agreement on the property. We're going to ask for privacy now. So if you'd please go back to your car so the sellers and I can discuss it. So for all of you, when you're a listing agent, just let the buyer agent present on your home. Just please do that and hope they can return the favor because it's a lot easier to negotiate. And I see Maggie coming on with a question, perhaps. Might that be right?
Yes, we have a question. Do you believe it is a good idea to ask the listing agent in advance of making an offer what sellers hope for as a close date?
Yes. What a perfect time. Perfect time to ask that question. Is it here? Yeah, right here. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So I'm getting ready to write an offer on your property, Maggie. I'm going to call you up. And Maggie, I got to be very careful. I can't ask you questions that would lead you to violate your fiduciary confidentiality with the sellers, right? I'm not going to do that. So let's just stay up on the screen, Maggie. I'll role play with you. Hey, Maggie. So I just call you. How are you doing, Maggie? Good to talk to you. How's everything?
Everything's great. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing really well because I am representing a buyer who likes your listing at 2715 Randolph, and we are in the process of writing up the purchase agreement. I've got the earnest money check. There's a few things on the contract that I haven't filled in yet, and one of the things I'd like to do is that my buyers have a degree of flexibility. So I just wanted to ask you, what are some things that you could, without violating confidentiality, what are some things that you could tell me about your sellers and their seller situation that I could address in this contract that would make your sellers happier? And make something up?
Yeah, that's a great question. My sellers have allowed me to say that they would like a quick closing, and yes, they would like to move on. So they've allowed me to say that. Okay,
and what would be the soonest and the longest within that span? Because I'll have to check with my buyers on that.
Well, the soonest would be the end of October, and the longest would be the end of November.
Okay, by the way, we're shooting this, what's the date today? September 29th. So yeah, so we're talking 4 weeks. So in other words, when you said quick closing, by the way, in my mind, I was thinking a week or two, and now you said 4 weeks. So now I've quantified what soon is. So Maggie, thanks for role playing. And I think to all of you, have good relationships with your fellow realtors and call the listing agent and say, what can we do to make this contract more pleasing to your buyer. And listing agents, so Maggie, you're doing your sellers a favor by divulging this, aren't you?
Absolutely.
You're not violating anything. So that's important. In the interest of time.
I have another question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What should you do when sellers are convinced of a number they want to sell for, but it's higher than the market value?
Do you want to sell? Do you want to stay?
Right.
I'm going to say this a billion times. I don't have any pricing techniques that will work for you if the sellers don't want to sell. So right away in the buyer counseling area, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, have you definitely decided to move at this time? Tell me why. What would happen if your home didn't sell? And if they said, well, if it doesn't sell, I guess we'll just stay here. There's no pricing technique I could present. Get to their motivation. And then the other thing I could get into an advanced presentation on this, are the sellers moving towards or away? Every human being, you know, you talk about Tony Robbins, towards pleasure, away from pain. Every time a human being does something, they're either trying to avoid pain in their life or they're trying to move towards pleasure. And it's a balance of both. Like I just moved from one car to another. I love the car I sold. It's not painful, but you know, it's kind of move on. But the one I'm buying is pure pleasure. I cannot wait to get into this new car. So for me, the motivation is pure pleasure. I had an old 93 Jeep a couple of years ago. That thing fell apart on me. I just wanted out of it. That was a pure moving away. So get to your seller's motivation, because if they're not motivated, price is not your problem. So I hope that helps. One final thing, and I believe we're coming close to the end of time. You present a contract, whether it's to another listing, yours, it doesn't matter. But the seller comes back and they say, well, we don't, you know, the price is too low. Earnest money's too low. We don't want to pay for this fee, and we don't want to include those personal property items. And I would say to my seller, say, Mr. Seller, those are 4 very legitimate changes that you would like to make, and I respect that. But I will just share with you on a personal note, if I go back to the buyers and say they want to change 1, 2, 3, 4 items, that's kind of a big sell. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. But let me ask you this question. Is there any one of these that if we really satisfied the one, you would concede all the other 3? And you can do this on your own, but let's say they'll probably go, well, you know what? If they come up another $5,000, we'll stick with the earnest money. We'll give them the stupid refrigerator. And yes, we'll wait another week to close. So now you've got something with which you can negotiate. So you can go back to the buyer and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you know, there was 4 major issues that they had with it. One was the washer and dryer. They did not want to give those to you. But I really worked with them and said, look, these guys are coming out of an apartment. They don't have any appliances. They really, really need them. And the seller said, well, okay. Then you could say, you owe me lunch for this one. And the closing date, you wanted to close on X. They really didn't want to do it till Y, but we found a place that they could do 2 moves and they're going to give you the closing date. The earnest money, they've been burned on a couple of houses. They wanted to double your earnest money. I showed them your qualification, pre-approval, your financial backing, and they agreed that you guys were earnest. So they agreed with that. You owe me breakfast, lunch, and dinner for this. The price, you guys came in 10 low. I told you there's no way that's going to happen. I told you I shouldn't have let you come in 10 low, but you made me do it. And they did counter the price. So that's the change. But the good news is they didn't counter the full 10. They only countered 5. Congratulations, you own a home. And you hand them the pen and get them to sign. So I realize the examples I use are a perfect world. So you have to adjust them to your world. And see if I have anything else here. So I think we've covered most of that. This is typically a 3-hour seminar when I'm doing it live, but I wanted to make sure that the key parts of this were ones that I think are my most important best things. Again, if you go to davidknox.com, you can see more of what we do. So I'm going to take a breath, and you guys can tell me how much time you have for questions. I'm good.
Great. Thank you so much, David. If there are any lingering questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box right now. Otherwise, I'll say thank you to you, David. It was wonderful. Thanks to Maggie and Mark, and thanks to everybody for joining us. I will give a second to see if there are any additional questions.
Yeah, I'm fine. Don't rush them. I was kind of racing through. They might need.
In the meantime, I will let you know also that this recording will be up at NHAR.org, and we'll also email it to all the attendees. So if there was anything you missed, if you had to step away for a minute, then you will be getting a recording of it soon. And it looks like we're just getting a bunch of great jobs and awesome. And thank you, David. So
good.
We'll echo that. And it looks like there's a question. Oh, thank you. Great tips. Yeah. Yep. Excellent.
Well, good. Well, I'd love to hear, seriously, I'd love to hear from people. You know, I'm not doing live seminars and don't know when I'll do them again. So the closest I can get is doing these live Zooms. And then afterwards, emails, david@davidknox.com. I'd love to hear from you. If there's something that really worked for you, I'd like to hear it. If you use something in a transaction that works, I want to hear that so I can maybe tell that story. And if you got some questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, put them in an email and I'll do my best to respond to them.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Goodbye, New Hampshire.